Welcome, a very warm welcome to you, our virtual audience and our delightful speakers to the first day of the MedGold Final Showcase event. My name is Katrina Stickle. I'm a moderator and a broadcaster, and I have the pleasure and the privilege of navigating all of us from my home office in Brussels through the plenary sessions of this two-day event that features a raft of really excellent speakers drawn from across the globe and, of course, from across the stakeholder ecosystem. Now, you, our audience, also represents a variety of different stakeholder groups, so you have a diverse knowledge and interests in the topics. So we have asked our speakers to pitch their presentations and their contributions to meet a variety of needs through some really compelling stories and narratives. So we've got another sort of three speakers who are part of the next bit of our session, and they're going to bring their diverse user perspectives. You've heard it already: olive, grape, durum wheat. How it all worked for them within MedGold. Why did they get involved? What use do they have for climate information? And I think what you would agree from what we've heard from our first five speakers, what specific information needs do they have? Don't forget, you can pose a question in the chat, and those questions I will pose to them in the last part of the session. Keep that question or comment super short, that's critical. So let me first invite them all to screen. We have Javier Lopez, who is a technician in the RD&I department at DCOOP, which is the largest cooperative in Southern Europe, the biggest olive oil producer in the world, and a leading wine producer, in addition, I believe, to operating supply, stock breeding, nuts and cereal sectors. I hope that's broadly correct. I can see you, and I can see our next speaker there. And we also have Antonio Grassa, who is head of R&D at SoGrape. That's a family-owned wine company that expanded actually from Portugal to the world, so other areas. So it has a nice global footprint, and he is scientific secretary with the Sustainable Development and Climate Change Expert Group of the International Organization of Vine and Wine. So he sort of has various hats, and he does actually sit on technical committees of other wine sector organizations in Europe and Portugal. And we also have Chiara Monotti, and she is senior purchasing manager at Barilla, which is actually a family business. I was surprised to read that. I didn't know that. Established, wow, in the 1800s, the late 1800s, offering diverse food products worldwide. I think you would probably have a lot in your kitchen cupboards. Now, I'm going to give each of you, I just wanted you to be able to say hello. I hope I have given the right information as a start off. I want to give each of you 5 minutes to sort of share your experience. And I'd like to start with Javier, please. So there you go. Now, the question is, if you have a presentation, I think you know how to use it. And don't forget at the end, don't click again, just leave it on the last slide. So if you have any problems, the technical team can take over. But otherwise, I will pop back at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katrina. Yes, I have a presentation. I believe you can hear me well, and see the presentation.
I can't see it yet. I'm having a look at the live, and I still see me. Hang on, there we go. I've disappeared. There you go.
Okay. My name is Javier. I am a researcher at the COP. The COP is a second-degree cooperative, Spanish second-degree cooperative agri-food. That's work to increase the benefit of our members. The COP has several agri-food sectors, as you can see in the slide. But in MedGold, the COP is the industrial partner from the olive industrial partner. Because the COP is the first producer of olive oil and table olive in the world. As you can see in the presentation, the COP has to manage a very large number of table olive, around 100,000 tons, and olive oil around 200,000 tons, and coordinate around 120 olive mills. It is a great challenge. In the next slide, okay. Regarding our motivation, well, we have two main motivation to take part in MedGoal. First, one of our value as agri-food secondary cooperative is the innovation, and this project is the perfect opportunity to increase our knowledge of climate service. And we are able to assist if our cooperative and the olive sector are ready for this type of information. But also the COI is subscribed to the Sustainable Development Goals from United Nations, including the Action 13, in which the MedGoal project can play a critical role to achieve our set objective. In the next slide, in terms of our needs, although all the actors are representing in the core value chain, farmer, olive mill, and other, we focus on some of needs from the COPS department that are affected by climatic conditions. For example, the pest and fertilizer advisory service for our supply and service department. The quality department could use some bioclimatic indicator to predict the quality of the olives. On the other hand, the olive oil production changes every year, what affects one, the price of the olive oil, which is critical for the commercial department. Two, the number of the samples that must be analyzed by our laboratory. And third, the logistics department has to coordinate the capacity of our olive mills and the COTS olive oil tanks. Finally, to conclude, the interest in the climate service is different according to actors in the olive production chain. We can assume the subseasonal time scale is useful for farmers and agronomists to help them make better crop management decisions, such as irrigation or harvesting time according to the temperature and precipitation prediction. Regarding the next scale, the seasonal forecast could be useful for first and second degree cooperative in terms of predicting the number of olives that will be produced for the next will be transformed into olive oil for the next campaign, or predicting the evolution of key pests in the following months based on some bioclimatic indicator. And finally, the climate projection could be information or interest for second degree cooperative, association, or even government to set the possible climate change mitigation measure, and so the more suitable production area for the olive tree regarding the expected change in the future. That is all from my side for now. Thank you.
You will be back. You are absolutely right to say the words for now. But you know, I think what was really interesting in your presentation was hearing how the information is used by all of those different actors in the core value chain within production, you know, and even there, you said at the end, can also, of course, be interesting for government in terms of putting in place mitigation measures. So really interesting to hear and to get a sense that this is very heterogeneous, how it's used and what the needs are. So beautifully interesting. I am going to ask you back in a bit because I do have some questions for you, but I'm going to crack on and hear from your two fellow speakers in this part of our session, and I will come back to Javier in a moment. Now, I can welcome now, and he calls himself the wine guy. I'm welcoming the wine guy, Antonio Grassa, to join me on screen, because he was a winemaker. And what was very interesting when I talked to you, Antonio, when we met before this event, you said, you know, what's so interesting is you've seen over time, you know, how climate impacts on grape quality, which I think you're going to talk about. And so you've seen this evolution. So you are very, very well placed to talk about the value of this project and, you know, what your own experience has been. Do you have slides to share with us, Antonio? You know
yes,
the
I
drill.
do, Katrina.
Yeah,
good morning.
You know the drill. Thank you.
I hope I have everything under control. Let's have a go
No
at
worries.
it. And thank you very much for your words.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, here we go then. So yes, okay, here we go. So yes, Sograp is a wine company. It's the leading wine company in Portugal, and we do have a global footprint, having started in 1942 in this country. We spread a bit around the world, always keeping the family company pedigree all around. So we were founded in 1942. Today, we are also producing wine after Portugal in Spain, Chile, Argentina, New Zealand. We also have distribution companies in several important markets for us, like the United States, UK, China, Brazil, and Angola in Africa. We understand wine as a product of people and a product for people. That's why climate has such an important aspect to this. And that's because this is the main function wine is for. It's for social bonding. This is what we use it for. And this social bonding comes from the emotions that wine gives us. And those emotions come from taste. So understanding how climate affects taste is really important to understand what you are doing and projecting what we do into the future. So in this picture, for example, we have a group of nice people enjoying wine. And today, with the services that we developed in MedGold, we can look back in time into the year the wines were produced, see how the climate was, and understand how that climate has shaped the taste we are feeling. By the way, this is part of the team of Sograp that joined also in the design of MedGold, and as it was said before, part of those people that have been involved since day one in co-designing what we have today. But there is another community to wine trade, and that is the community of producers, people who work the land, people who are there every day under the rain, under the sun, and who have to make decisions as to how they should better develop their activity in order to make the grapevine thrive, and most important, to make the grapevine produce what is needed so that the wine coming from those grapes has that taste that makes the emotion. So for this, in the climate services we have developed, we have created seasonal forecasts that allow us to peer into the future about 7 months and allow the grower and farmers to understand if they will need to beware regarding the possibility of having pests or diseases, if they are going to need irrigation, if their vegetation is going to grow fast or slow, and therefore adapt in terms of procuring products, labor, and planning their actions all year long. By doing that, they become more efficient and at the same time more resilient. But there is also a last, not least important aspect to winemaking, and that is the land that we sculpt. Winemaking is a tradition. It's a very old tradition with mankind, for civilization. As far as we can peer back into our past as a civilization, there has always been wine around. And we have developed full landscapes around the creation of this product. Now, it's really important to be able to look into the future and understand if under the future climate, 30, 50, 100 years from now, will we still be able to have the necessary conditions to make wines as we used to have them before. So in this project, also, we have the development of long-term projections developed so that this can be integrated into the strategic planning of both individual farmers, but also larger companies, as is our case, and ensure that the legacy we received will carry on for future generations to still keep bonding over a glass of wine. I would like to finish with this sentence that goes 500 years back. It was allegedly said by Galileo, which is wine is sunlight held together in water. I don't think of a better description of to describe what we do. So thank you, Katrina.
Thank you very much. And I love the way you say, you know, social bonding over a glass of wine. I think in these times, and not least during COVID, I think people were social bonding with themselves and their families over about 25 glasses of wine a day, probably. But that's a whole other conversation.
Always in moderation, Katrina, always in moderation.
Yeah, always in moderation. Absolutely. Super interesting. And not least, I mean, I won't talk to you now because in the interest of time, but not least what you say, listen, this is all about sculpting the landscape. And of course, you also have particular needs in this sector, and those have to fit alongside a landscape in the EU, well, beyond, but certainly in the EU, where land is at a premium for so many different users, you know, whether it's biomass, whether it's, you know, so you've got all of that as well. That's that stress, that's to take into account in this, in that longer term.
And now we have this beautiful tool.
And now you have this beautiful tool. Absolutely. And by the way, I didn't say to the audience, but you should know this if you're looking at the programme, that of course we are going to hear about the dashboard itself that was mentioned in the opening in more detail in not too long. So Antonio, take a short breather backstage. You can listen to thank you so much. We've got our last of this particular section speaker, so that we can hear about the other important food sector, the agri-food sector that was part of this project. And here joining me is Chiara Monotti from Barilla, which also is a family company. So it would be good to hear from you, Chiara, and see where there's overlaps with what we heard from Javier and Antonio in terms of projections and seasonal forecasts and the indicators. But, you know, what's your involvement been, your needs, your expectations, slightly different. So let's hear your perspective, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katerina, and good morning, everyone. In fact, as you just said, Barilla is an Italian food manufacturer and was born in 1877. So we are at the 4th generation now. Barilla is a company which employs roughly 8,500 people, operates in over 100 countries with 19 brands, and is present with 30 production districts, 15 of which in Italy and 15 abroad. Barilla produces pasta, sauces, and ready meals, the ones that you see here on the chart on the left, which we call meal solutions, which constitute roughly 55% of the whole turnover of the company. And the rest comes from bakery products for a 45% overall. On the chart on the right, you can see that, again, regarding the turnover, we have in Italy, where is the headquarters, we have the greatest part of the turnover of the company for roughly a 43%, followed by the rest of Europe and Russia for 33%, and always considering the main percentages around 20% regarding the Americas. So just coming down to the point of Med Gold, why did Barilla participate in Med Gold? As a big user of durum wheat and also pasta producer, for the great opportunity of applying seasonal predictions and long-term climate projections to durum wheat. In terms of climate adaptation, two climate scales are in fact important for Barilla. One is the seasonal predictions at 6 months' time. This in particular because durum wheat, differently from the olives and wine, which is produced from grapes, is an annual crop. So it is very helpful for our suppliers, which are the farmers, to get information in advance during the course of crop cultivation inside the same year. This allows them to better conduct crop activities in general, like, for example, fertilization, pest management, or harvesting. The second climate scale, which is important for Barilla, is the long-term projection, which allows to inform on changes in yield and suitable cultivation areas in the long future time. In Med Gold, we studied a period between 20 and also 40 years' time. This is helpful to forecast the evolution of the crop globally, of course, but also for future policy planning, for example, or variety selection, for the potential development of new pests and diseases, and also for the future use of investments. So I was very brief up to now. This is actually the end of my very short introduction. I thank you very much for your attention, and I remain here, of course, for all your questions and also for the panel discussion that will come later on.
Thank you so very much. And to coin a phrase from Arnold Schwarzenegger, you will be back. And again, super fascinating. And what is such a privilege as well as a moderator is, you know, I don't know to what extent, perhaps less wine, but the point is we do take all of these products in some ways for granted, and it's such a pleasure and a privilege to really hear what goes on behind. And also, as you rightly said, listen, this is different, you know, durum wheat, different kind of crop, you know, it's a crop, so we're not looking at grapes and we're not looking at olive oil, and so these are the kinds of things that we need to predict, and the planning that is so far ahead. So don't forget, audience, you can put questions in, which I will pose to the speakers. I might have to marginally keep that question time down in order to gain a few minutes, but we're going to move on to the next bit of the session, and I want to just start off by saying in that the issue of stakeholder relationships arises no matter which sector I moderate, and you know, those relationships, I think you will all know that because you come from different stakeholder perspectives, those relationships and dynamic between NGOs and policymakers, between business and academia, between industry and consumers. It's really critical, but it's absolutely not the easiest nut to crack. Now, we're going to hear from two Med Gold stakeholders on the issue of trust within knowledge exchange. We're going to hear some thoughts on how to bridge that gap between science and users and find not just perhaps common ground, but a common language. So can I just welcome to the screen our two next speakers. We have from the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, Energy and Sustainable Economic Development, from the Technical Unit for Energy and Environmental Modelling, Sandro Calmanti. So,
morning.
Hello, I gave you a bit of a longer lead up there, didn't I? And welcome back. And also from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, we have researcher and science communicator. I love that, science communicator. Such a good job title and job, Marta Terrado. So welcome to both of you. Marta, you are going to sort of listen to your peer there. I'm going to invite Sandro to first take the floor. No more than 5 minutes if possible. I don't want to rush you. It's just a nice reminder so we have some space to hear from our audience. So Sandro, you're first. What are you going to share with us? What's the focus in one sentence of your presentation?
Well, I would like to, share some insight, some experience about the question of trust and how trust is built with this continuous process of knowledge exchange with stakeholders, with users of climate services, which is what we have done during the project. And you know, I would like to start with this list of keywords that we can take as 7 pillars of trust in climate services. And I would like to read through these important keywords, starting with credibility, which implies that the source of data must be authoritative and information must be convincing, which means that, for example, information must be presented in a professional way. And this, of course, has given a large role to research organization in being the first drivers in the development of climate services. Timeliness is an important concept. It refers to the need of synchronizing the information with key decisions that they are linked to. But although it might sound obvious in a way, as a matter of fact, since climate services tend to interact with a complex operational decisional landscape, timeliness is not always and not only a synonym for as quick as possible. This is not as simple as that. It means, in a more general way, that timing of information need, rather than being a continuous process, is usually follows a very precise schedule. And for the case of agri-food sector is most of the times a seasonal schedule. Then climate information must be accessible. And this is particularly important because often the added value generated by climate information is not immediately measurable within this complex decisional framework. Think of the case of, for example, planting a new vineyard or selecting a new variety that Chiara was mentioning before. So climate information is just one piece of information among many different sources, and therefore it must be accessed easily and also at a reasonable cost if we want it to be used. Reliability is on one hand as a very precise statistical definition in the context of statistical forecasting, but as a general concept, it implies that information should reflect expectations in a way, not only in terms of the skill of a forecast, for example, but also in terms of the operational capacity. Of course, information must be relevant, and this implies that it must be specific, which in the context of Met Gold, for example, it means that a significant effort, a significant amount of time has been devoted to define climate indicators tailored to the different case studies. For example, specific risk indicators for grapes or a family of indicators for the study case on durum wheat. So information must be tailored. And the concept of relevance is closely related to the concept of usability, and usability implies that information must be tailored to the decision-making process, and this is usually an important challenge for the development of climate services, because usability most of the times works a bit against the concept of replicability, because as Alessandro put it very nicely at the beginning of the session this morning, climate services mean different things for different people. So, and we have seen this in Met Gold very clearly, which means then coming to the last keyword, that information must be salient. It means that information should speak to users. And I will show you an example of this in a second. It is not sufficient that information is of good quality. It must be compelling. It must really tell a story. And so I will just quickly focus on two processes that we have followed during MedGold. One is, for example, the co-design and co-development of a data stream that starts from a credible source of data. It must be designed, the data streams, in a way that it provides information and data when it is required. It must be accessible. And of course, it has been designed so that it delivers relevant data. And the other example, which was also very nice, and we have mentioned it before, is how to make uncertainty understandable. And we have been working a lot on this in MedGold because scientists and climate experts usually focus a lot on the quality of forecast to sell the value of climate services. And in MedGold, we have engaged a lot with users to identify a working definition of reliability and of the quality of data. And the dialogue with users, for example, has suggested that instead of focusing a lot on the concepts like skill score, which is the usual vocabulary of climate services, maybe sometimes simpler concepts like heat rates of a forecast are more appealing to users, and they make information more understandable and easy to accept. And so this is, you know, the main concept. I want just these two examples I want to share with you. Perfect. And I leave the floor to Martha.
Thank you. It's so hard and so interesting. And I have to say that I think 7 pillars of trust, so many of those words would just apply to us as people. I think so many of those in terms of how we trust one another. And by the way, your 7th word, salient, it's one of my favorite words. So you very rarely hear it, but it's very good. You said salient. That means the information has to speak to users, mustn't just be good quality, it must also be compelling. Can I remind our audience, if you have questions, now maybe we're doing our job so beautifully and I already have questions for these good people, so no worries, but if you do, it needs to be on the in the chat on Swapcard and they get sent to us. Right, lovely Marta, you have been very patient. So I'm going to give you the floor to follow that very, very interesting presentation. What are you going to focus on, Marta?
So yeah, I'm going to focus on a topic very similar to what Sandro explained. I'm going to expand it a little bit more and complement his explanations. So it will be about knowledge, the knowledge approach that we have applied in MedGold. And to start, I would like to have a look together with all of you to the approach that we have followed in MedGold, which we can summarize as an iterative cycle, as you can see in the screen, with different stages. That goes from raising awareness about the project in order to engage with users. Then it moves to a stage of knowledge exchange to involve the users and scientists together in a discussion. And then a stage of co-development where new knowledge is created and users are empowered. And then this stage can then continue and begin again with a new cycle by engaging with new users. And in this intervention, I will concentrate specifically in this second stage, which is about the stage where knowledge exchange occurs. And I will focus in 3 different aspects. The first will be the creation of communication materials that are suitable to support stakeholder engagement. The second, I will focus on building a shared and agreed vocabulary between users and scientists. And then the third one will be the communication of uncertainty or the communication of certainty. It depends on how we want to look at it. Then, for the communication in MedGold, we have developed different types of communication materials to engage with users. Materials like info sheets, for instance, help explain concepts and deliver key messages to stakeholders. And it's important that they are written in a terminology which is attuned to stakeholders' context. This means that we need the stakeholders to participate to help us develop this type of materials because they need to be in their language. User guides explaining how to use climate services tools created in the project have been also extremely useful, especially to those that are new to any of the platforms that have been created. And multi-language versions of these guides have been created because we believe that delivering information in the vernacular language of users also needs to be considered as a part of delivering a climate service. Then, climate scientists and stakeholders don't talk the same terminology, and that's a fact. In this word cloud that you can see, there are different terms that are difficult or confusing, let's say, to understand by non-experts. And these terms have been actually identified in a workshop with representatives of the climate services community and include words like the ones that Sandro mentioned: skill, uncertainty, anomalies, percentiles, and so on. If we take the example of uncertainty, we can see that the scientific community, and this is a definition from the IPCC, defines uncertainty as a lack of information or disagreement that can be assessed either in quantitative or qualitative terms. However, if we look at the word up in a common dictionary, uncertainty is defined a bit differently. It is lack of uncertainty, doubt, even vagueness. So the connotations of what climate scientists understand as uncertainty and what users and the society understand are quite different. And this is also something important to take into account when we communicate this information. Finally, in MedGoal, we have worked also to make the communication of uncertainty easier. Imagine that this is the prediction of the average temperature for next summer. Among these three categories that you can see, there is a higher probability that the temperature in summer will be above normal, which is the red category that you can see. However, there is also uncertainty in this prediction because the probability that temperature is not above normal is more than 50%. And apart from the probabilities, users have even more pressing questions, which is, can I trust this prediction? For instance, did it perform well when you applied it in the past? And to convey that information during the project, we have explored different ways to visualize climate information. And one of these ways has been by using quality filters. If you see this map on the right, the skill filter, which represents the quality of the prediction, is now off. And if you activate this filter, actually, you can hide those regions for which the prediction has not enough quality to be applied for decision making. And now these regions appear hidden. So the points raised in this presentation are just three from the many that have emerged during the discussions between scientists and stakeholders. And there are many more. But the main message here is that addressing all these aspects is imperative. First, to boost the uptake in climate information, and then to help stakeholders adapt to climate change. Yeah. And that's it. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're just scribbling there. I think, and you make a very important point, it's also to boost the uptake of use. The more tailored it is, the more co-developed, the more languages, the more you can get that. That was a very interesting example of the vocabulary. Then you boost the uptake. Now, if I can, I'm going to ask you, Marta, just briefly to take a moment behind the scenes, and I'm going to give us I'm going to invite back, if I may, Javier, Antonio, and Chiara for a brief, what I call, this is my favorite term as a moderator, brain box bingo. That means I have a few questions, but in the interest of time, you're going to have to be very concise. So don't forget, speakers, audience can connect with you on the Swapcard platform. That's where you can have more of a chat via video or via typing. But for now, this is the top line, please, responses to questions. Now, I'm going to start with a question that I think it can go to both Antonio and Chiara, if I may, and that is very simply, I mean, we've heard actually a lot about this, but just encapsulate in a couple of sentences the added value of co-production in a project like MedGold? Antonio, why don't you start with a beautifully concise answer? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. Well, very shortly, I think it creates a bridge. On one side, co-production allows scientists to identify real-world issues and see how they impact the generation of value for society and also for organizations. Conversely, users become aware of the limits of science and will not ask for the sky, but rather moderate their aspirations to what is actually scientifically possible. So it is this bridging of understanding between both sides that co-development allows.
Really interesting. Absolutely. Thank you. Very, very precise. And also that you keep coming back to this issue, you keep saying, and it's important, that it's identifying real world issues for society at large, because this is what we keep coming back to, because that is kind of the end beneficiary, the end user. And as I said, we're going to hear more about how this all fits in with SDGs and the wider society needs and challenges later in our event. So same question for you, please, Chiara. The added value, if you have to add something that hasn't been said, what would you define as that added value?
Yes, first of all, I would like to thank Antonio, because actually I can share my same perspective on this. In particular, because we could really, as Barilla, share our needs so that we could actually work on more tailored solutions for us. So we had the opportunity, the great opportunity of working together with people with very different backgrounds from ours. And their expertise allowed finding solutions for climate services in practice with real cases which we could apply actually to Durum Wheat. So this was really a tremendous help and added value overall to have very different expertise from ours to get connected and to find the right solutions to the real problems and to the real cases that we had.
Thank you very much also for being so concise. I'm going to straight on to a next question, and it's that's important in terms of sort of your evolution and your involvement in it. So I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to bring in Javier, and then I'm going to ask the same question to Antonio, if I may. What type of climate information were you using before MedGold? And then how would you say that specifically there's been that evolution, so that involvement in this co-production process has benefited? Just a couple of concrete benefits. You know me, I always ask big vision, what we must do, what we are doing, but what are the actual benefits? So you can give me a couple of examples for your company or for your company's operations. So Javier, over to you first, please.
Okay, well, the core had no previous experience in this field of climate service. However, we can say that we made our estimates based on our experience and data from the past. Regarding the benefits, in my opinion, the co-developed process increase end user trust in developed tools, because the end user help to create a tool, and they can see the progress done in the tool, and know which needs are or are not solved, and the reason, even sometimes the suggestion done by the end user are implementing by the climate science in the tool, and that make you feel a little proud and you trust in this tool co-developed.
Thank you very much. And as we heard from Sandro, trust is something that needs a lot of unpicking. One word, it's very, very complex. And just one element that's not there can mean that trust that can lead to a lack of trust or put a dent in the trust. Antonio, something concrete that we can see. We've heard lots of good things. We've already got a good grasp of benefits, but a couple of concrete things.
Well, very easily. Before this, we were mostly using weather forecasts for very short periods, like 5 to 10 days, which would not allow us to project our planning more into the future. Or we would have to use climatology, that is, the past climate as a model for what would happen in the future. Now, the problem is that with climate change, the only thing we can be certain of is that the past is not a good forecast of the future. And therefore, we were using information that was not actionable to make our vineyard planting decisions, choice of varieties, if we would need irrigation or not, and so on and so on. So on top of that, we also got information from weather stations that were mostly from the National Weather Services. And those weather stations are mostly located in urban areas that do not represent well what's going on in the countryside. So the possibility of using in a fast and accessible and understandable way information coming from the Copernicus data store that pretty much has reliable information for all points in the global surface has been a major advancement to our capacity to plan strategically.
Okay, thank you very much. And as we said, you said fast, which is important. And also, as Sandro said, timeliness doesn't necessarily mean as quick as possible either. I mean, I know you meant it in this context, but it has a very, very specific meaning. So challenges, I mean, it has sounded very rosy thus far. However, it is obvious that there are challenges. I mean, in that rosiness, even we heard from Marta there, that speaking the same language, we had a very, very concrete example, very, very sector specific needs, critical. But I am going to ask about challenges, and at this point at 11:18, let me let our audience and speakers know I will close this session 15 minutes later at 11:30. We had a few technical hitches at the beginning, but you will get a break and you will get lunch before the afternoon parallel sessions, don't worry. So challenges, just very briefly, let's focus on some of those main challenges, and obviously it's always helpful. Were they open-ended and they somehow are still ongoing, or they got solved? That's always helpful to hear. Chiara, let me start with you, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrina. Yes, the main challenge actually was something that was already cited by many speakers before, is actually setting the scene between the users and the scientists. This was crucial at the beginning of the project overall. And also, as Marta was saying, we actually held a workshop on that with all the users and all the scientific community so that we could actually find a common language, set the real path for everybody, define a glossary, as well as also basically coming to the right climate terminology. So actually this was the first very important step that we all took in order to get to the different points of view, connecting to get to the same path.
Interesting, glossary, absolutely. Thank you for that. And it was so clear. I mean, you are echoing exactly what Antonio said. You say that, you know, this user scientist scene setting, and he said, listen, we've got to bridge that gap between the scientists identifying the real world issues and the users who have to be aware of the limits of science, and drilling down into the details of a glossary and ironing out definitions being a critical part of that. Let me come to Javier. Sorry. What if you had to pick one challenge during the process and how it was solved, what would you focus upon?
Yes, I fully agree with Chiara. Medgold has caused a constant knowledge sharing from all partners. We have had to speak the same language. Yeah. But also a great challenge that the core has had to face was the assist all the information from our value chain to identify which of them could be used to reach the goal of the project. We had many internal discussion with the main DevOps department and several type of interaction with between the code and MedGold, in which we had to be sure we were understanding each other correctly. Maybe, in my opinion, it was our main challenge. Yes.
Did you have those internal discussions with a glass of Antonio's wine in hand and some and a plate of Varela pasta? That's the question. That's critical, you see. I would be happy to have chats if I had all of these delicious products to hand. Expectations, I've got a couple more questions. So first of all, to you, Antonio, I mean, expectations, one always has expectations of a project. Did you have them? Did they change? Were they delivered on? Did they evolve? Just give us a little bit of a feel.
Yes, very much. Actually, that was also a challenge because which was managing my own expectations during the project. Because I came in the project and when we started interacting, I was starting to think, wow, we have here the possibility of really starting to have a crystal ball that is going to tell us exactly when it's going to rain, where, and so on. And then I had a reality check and realized that well, the science is still not that advanced, so it's not going to go there. And there was this moment where I was kind of, well, not depressed, but a little bit disappointed that it wouldn't go there. And from then, from that point up, I started to create the real expectation of what was feasible and how that could actually play into making value to what we do. And that building of expectations from that reality check on was really very important, because instead of trying to aim for something that would be blue sky, I started to understand that we had to change the way we thought about climate predictions.
Right. Yeah,
and not just having the climate predictions change the way they thought about us. And so we started in agriculture. People have this habit to be very deterministic about the way how they think. And what this has shown me and my team is that we have to have a more probabilistic approach. And we have to understand probabilities, uncertainty, and make our decisions based on managing those probabilities, which translates as managing risk. That was one of the greatest insights we had in this process.
Thank you. Very interesting. Very interesting. Just a minute each, because I need to close at 11:30. Antonio, I'll come to Javier first. So we heard there from Marta, we need to boost uptake as well. I think, but I guess I will ask, do you think there is an added value in making co-production a more widely used approach? For me, it's a no-brainer. You might disagree, but just one, and I mean beautifully concise, one way we can do that. Javier, what would you say?
Well, absolutely, yes. I believe co-production progress in topic of new technology for the agri-food sector, like MedGold, is a key. How can we do it? It's a very good question. From my experience from MedGold, I believe there can be different valid answers. However, I believe that one of the best in the MedGold co-development strategy has been to have always open communication channel between the end user and the developer of climate service. In our case, well, I believe have periodic meetings with this part of the production progress is the best or one of the best strategy to apply the co-development process.
Thank you. Antonio, what would you say? A different, just one and very concise, please. How can we get an uptake? How can people plug into this and be a part and use this co-production approach?
Ownership. I think that's the key word for co-production, because the user becomes a co-owner of what is developed. His needs are understood in the beginning of the process, not in the end. They are not. He's not being fed something. He is actually growing something together with people who are experts in what they do. And that makes the user owner also of the product that is produced, and he is implicated. When you do that, you don't have the usual valley of death between the creation of the invention and the innovation that will put it to good value. Ownership for me is key here.
Thank you. I tell you what I'm going to do. We have only 2 minutes left. I'm going to have a last word from Chiara, because you haven't spoken for a while. I'm going to ask our lovely three, I'm going to release them, and I'm going to have, and I mean a super short last word from Sandro and Marta, just if there was anything there that they thought, oh, damn it, I wish I was there on screen to answer one of those questions. So Chiara, last word from you, something you didn't get to say.
Yes, thank you very much, Katrina. Actually, I completely agree with what Antonio and Javier said. So basically, we already spoke about the challenges, and the point was really to find the common ground about what we were expecting as users that thought that could be possible in terms of reliability of the forecast, and then what actually was truly possible in terms of probability. And then we start building from there and understanding what could be the value for us as Barilla, and also as the other partners that worked with us on the dual wheat sector inside MedGold.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. And also about managing those expectations and coming with an open mind and evolving with the process. Thank you so much. You three have been brilliant. I'm going to ask the technical team if they can, just briefly, before I take people into the break. Marta, Sandro, 30 seconds each. 40 seconds each. If you can join me, let me give you the opportunity, because I like to be very balanced when I moderate. Was there anything there? Ah, man, the audience didn't hear this, and it's important that they do. So Marta, Sandro, let me start with you and we'll close with Marta. Very briefly, anything you need to unmute yourself? There's always one. It was you. No worries.
Yeah.
What did we not hear, or what do you want to underline?
I would like to underline and come back again on the concept that Antonio has put forward about changing expectations and changing the vocabulary. Sometimes I've also mentioned this before. This is what we have done, for example, about the concept of uncertainty and thinking about how we represent the skill of the forecast. This is something that, from my perspective, for example, has changed a lot during NetGold, and I understand now that maybe I have to put things in a more simpler way. It doesn't need to get, skyrocketing. Sometimes simpler information, but it's something that can become immediately useful.
Okay, thank you so much, Marta. Now we just have a question coming in right at the end. Perhaps we could answer that online. I think it might be wise. But let me just come to Marta. What resonated for you, or what did you want to underline, or what didn't you hear and you need to tell the audience?
Yeah, as Sandro picked the expectations, I would pick the ownership idea that Antonio also mentioned, because I think we haven't expanded a lot on that. Just Antonio mentioned it. And I think this has been key in the project, because this has allowed us to somehow empower the users that we have in the project. It's not us, it's all together, of course. So they are convinced enough to go out there, to go to their communities and spread the word on the services that have been developed and on the usefulness of these services. And this wouldn't have been possible without the users, because they are the ones who have the contacts and who have a reputation, let's say, in the sectors they will be listened to. So it's a great way to help in the dissemination and helping that this uptake, this final uptake of the services by society.
Thank you very much. Let me just see, maybe this is one for you, Sandro, but it's got to be quick and maybe it could be more sort of answered more broadly online, or whoever wants to jump on and answer this. In the EU in 2016, there were 10.5 million agricultural holdings, 2/3 of which were less than 5 hectares in size. So it means different farm sizes, different needs, different types of awareness of climate services, climate science, and so on. Did you consider defining ways to respond to these different needs?
Yes, yes. This was one of the objectives of the project. Translate information, having in mind this issue of the complexity of the landscape of users we are talking to. This was actually the first message again from Alessandro. No, climate service is a different things for different people. That's a clear challenge now for each one of us.
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to get into a broader conversation, whoever posted that online, don't forget you can call for one of these good people to have a broader chat. So I slightly exceeded the time, and the question always comes in at the last minute. You ask and ask and ask, and then bam, something comes that needs hours of discussion. So let's take a break now, 30 minutes until 11:45, okay, ahead of our second plenary session today towards useful and usable climate services. We're going to focus a little bit more on the technical aspects of the co-development process of climate services, on delivering that useful and usable information. And we heard usability, that was in Sandro's list when he talked about trust, and also on evaluating the value for users. So take a quick browse of the Swapcard platform. Seriously, there are so many opportunities to hook up with speakers and fellow participants, find out more about the MedGold project. See you at 11:45 sharp. Thank you so much to all my delightful speakers and to the lovely audience for your attention. See you soon. A very warm welcome back to our audience and a new lineup of speakers to this second 90-minute plenary session. It's called Towards Useful and Usable Climate Services. Those are very important words. I think we're going to find out why in this session. And as I said before the break, this session focuses on the overall, on the more technical aspects of the co-development process of climate services. We explored a lot about that meaningful co-development in the first session, including how the information is tailored to create fit-for-purpose climate services and to deliver, there we go again, useful and usable information. And we'll also continue evaluating the value from an economic, from a social and from an environmental perspective that it brings to users and, well, to society at large. So I think we should have a slide to have a look at who is joining us in this session, because again, we've got these kind of different parts. We've got a little bit of a puzzle there, so take a moment to have a look. And of course, on the Swapcard platform itself, you can also read the bios of speakers for those who provided them, and I think that's most of them, and you can have a look at what's coming up. So let's dive into the first 15 minutes. It looks at co-developing tailored climate information for decision making. We heard that word tailored from Chiara in our first session. It's absolutely critical. So let's just meet them first. We've got from the Barcelona Supercomputing Center, Climate Services Team Leader Nube Gonzalez. There you are. From the European Commission Joint Research Center, we've got Senior Researcher Andrea Toretti. And from the National Observatory of Athens, Research Director Christos Giankopoulos, or Giankopoulos. I may not have put the accent in the right place. Forgive me. So you each have 5 minutes to share your thoughts and your experiences as technical partners. Again, for our audience, you can send in a super short question, please not at the last minute. I won't pose it immediately, but later. Now, this really is a question of ladies first. Nube, we're going to start with you. You do have slides, but on this occasion, the technical team is going to operate them. So, of course, you call for the next slide when you need it. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Good morning, everyone. As Katrina said, my name is Nube Gonzalez. Please go ahead. Next slide. Let me start this presentation by showing you this infographic that is made with Lego bricks, in which I think is a very well way of illustrating the idea of the data are not synonymous of information. So in the top part of this slide, we can see a bunch of Lego bricks that are all mixed up around, and they are representing the data. And then if we would like to obtain information, we have to process this data and that to have information just in the bottom part of the slide. And on top of that, if we would like this information to be ready for use for decision makers, it's really important to involve the decision makers within this processing of the data. So something similar of this happening with the climate data. So next, please. So briefly, let me explain what is climate data. Climate data is coming from a climate model, and a climate model that is just in the center of the slide is a mathematical representation of the physical processes of the Earth climate systems that is on the left part of the slide. Next, please. So as I said before, climate data is not the same as climate information. And this is what I would like to show you here with this step. So in the first step, the blue one, we have the climate data. That is the data coming from the climate model that I explained you before. And in the last step, on the red one on the top, we have climate information ready to use by the medical user. So basically in between, what we have is several steps in which we have correct the biases associated to the climate data. We also have assessed the quality of the climate data, and also we have communicated the uncertainty associated to them. We have also tailored a little bit more the climate information by creating a specific indicator. And at the last step, we have been exploring different visualization in order to present this information to a broad community of users in an easy as possible way. So basically, I explained this like a very linear process, but in fact, it's not that linear, because in every single step, we have been interacting with users. So for instance, in the beginning, we would like to know what are the user climate needs, for instance. Then at a later stage, we will be exchanging knowledge. And then at the later stage, we have co-developing together with them climate information, useful, and also co-developing with them the medical dashboard. Next, please. So basically, sorry, I think there are some problems here. So yeah, I think you can hear me well now. Yes, as I say, with the medical dashboard, we have been providing climate information at different temporal scales. We have provided information at seasonal temporal scales. That means information up to 6 months into the future. And also we have been providing information, climate information, for the forthcoming century. Next, please. In the dashboard, we are providing climate information at 3 different levels of complexity. We have provided information relative to essential climate variable as information for temperature or rainfall, but also we have co-developed together with the user some climate-related indicator, as for instance, some number of days above or below a certain temperature threshold, for instance, that can be interesting for some particular decision makers. And also we have go one step forward, and we have provide risk indices that basically we have a couple of examples here, for instance, the sanitary risk index, or also some heat-related risk index. So I'm gonna leave it here and allow my colleagues continue with this explanation of the co-development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Absolutely super interesting, and filled in the next bit of the puzzle. We are going to hear about the dashboard, this mysterious dashboard. Well, we all know about the dashboard. We're going to find out more about it shortly. Just one quick question and I'm moving on. Just be concrete, if you will, Nubia. You said correct biases associate with climate data. So give me a concrete example of that, of correcting. What bias would it correct and how?
Yes, so basically the climate model are not perfect. So this means that the climate model maybe are not able to fully reproduce all the physical processes behind the climate system. So then, for instance, I don't know, an example can be that one particular model can have the temperature over the Atlantic Ocean higher than the temperature is in the observation.
Okay.
So this means a bias. It's a kind of systematic error that the model reproduces. So our role here is to remove those biases in order to post-process the data and the data be ready for use by the decision makers.
And one more I'm going to pick up on, and it's so important because you do obviously make that distinction between data and information. That's exactly where you started. In the last session, Sandro was talking about compelling, I think when he used the word salient at the end, and he was talking about trust, the information needs to be compelling and of good quality, or the data. So when you said they're assess the quality, what for you is poor quality data? What would you flag up and go, oh, that's poor quality?
So basically what we do is we compare the prediction of the past with the observation. We systematically compare them, and we try to see how many times the prediction has matched the observation. So basically this is what we call a skill, and then the skill need to be positive in order to have an added value for user to make use of them.
Thank you. And I did pick up, you said you interact with your user throughout every single step, including in, creating the dashboard. Okay, hold that thought. If we have questions, I'm saying again to the audience, just in case you weren't listening or you're having a cup of tea, keep your question short, put it in the chat of Swapcard, and we will endeavour to pose a few at the end of our session. Let me move directly now on to Andrea Toretti, if I may, and you also, I believe, are going to share a presentation. What are you going to focus on, Andrea? What are you going to bring to us today?
Yeah, thanks, Katrina. I'm going basically to continue this journey into climate services, the added value, and why MedGold has been so important in actually bringing climate services towards users, and users actually towards climate services. So I will briefly talk about these points and what MedGold has been achieving in the last 5 years.
Okay, perfect. So I think you have some slides, which if your clicker works, you can, there we go, forward yourself. Just don't forward. When you get to the last one, leave it. Otherwise, you'll get taken back to the beginning. So don't click again when you reach the end. Okay.
I'm trying to, I think now I see the, can you see the slide, the second one?
The slide, absolutely. Yep, can see you and the slide.
Yeah, perfect. I hope you can see the second slide because I see only the, do you see the second slide or only the one with the title?
Just see the main slide, co-developing tailored climate information for decision making.
Because I moved to the second one, but you cannot see.
Hold a moment. There we go. There it was. Now it's gone. Hang on. There, there it is.
Here we are. Yeah, perfect. So this slide is basically to explain why climate service is so important. If we look at what might happen in the coming decades, basically we know that climate change is going to affect all the key socioeconomic sectors. But when it comes to agriculture, well, agriculture is really exposed and vulnerable. It is also actually contributing and determining part of the climate change. If we look at extreme events, for instance, extremes such as the severe drought that affected a big part of Europe in 2018 and actually caused huge losses in the agricultural sector. Well, this event in 2-3 decades from now, basically they are going to become the norm. So they might occur almost every year. And climate projections basically tell us that there might be remarkable reductions in productivity of the main crops, especially in the southern